Hi there. The purpose of this video is to help you prepare to carry out an appreciative inquiry interview with someone in your organisation. We hope that this short video will guide you through the interview process and help you build some confidence in creating a really positive and generative experience between you, and to help you understand what to do with some unexpected responses you might get, as well as prepare to coming to the summit later on. So hopefully you've already seen the other videos which explain a bit more about appreciative inquiry and why we're using it. This is all sort of part of a culture change process, and this video is only going to focus on the interview itself. But it's worth reminding ourselves that when we're doing appreciative inquiry, we're working down the right-hand side of this particular process. So we're really looking to identify moments and experiences when things have been working in the direction of the things that you want to grow in your organisation. So we're going to focus on finding those stories, finding those experiences, and then together to collaboratively inquire into the root causes of those examples so that we can grow more of them in the organisation. As you will have seen in the other videos, appreciative inquiry follows a structure. We're not going to go into that right now, but what we're going to focus on before we get to the summit is a process which we think of as discovery. And what this means is that a lot of people will be going out in the organisation, jumping what might be seen as silos or boundaries and hierarchy, and talking to different people and gathering these stories. And those stories will all focus on specific topics. They are affirmative topics. They're things that are phrased in the positive, and they're things that you want more of rather than things that you want to eliminate or solve in the organisation. So let's have a think about what an appreciative inquiry interview is constructed of. It has several phases, and we're going to walk through each of them in turn, and I'm going to show you some very short clips of video of an appreciative inquiry interview in process, so you can see how we handle certain questions. I need to point out that the appreciative inquiry interview you're about to witness on this video is not really orientated specifically to your organisation, and it's with somebody who knows nothing about your organisation. So the answers and the content of this person's answers are not important to you. What's important is how I, as an interviewer, handle certain situations, and hopefully it will give you some ideas for developing your own characteristics. The main thing with an appreciative inquiry interview is that you just relax and build a nice rapport with somebody, and you gather great stories. Everything else is a bonus. So as you can see here, an appreciative inquiry interview is guided by what we call a protocol. And a protocol merely means a structured process. And there are usually 4 parts to an appreciative inquiry interview. In the beginning, you're going to try to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. This form of introduction helps you to locate the strategy, perhaps, that this is part of, or to connect it to something that's meaningful for you or for the respondent, or hopefully for both of you, so that they start to feel and see the point of the interview and the information you're gathering. When you feel like you've made that connection and you've located the work in something meaningful, we can get on with the main parts of the interview. And that starts with a question that's relating to the person's starting point, or something about their values, what they're proud of. And in a way, the information that's gathered at this point isn't necessarily going to be used in any way in the upcoming summit or whatever process that you're going to be involved in. But it's a way of getting the person talking, a way of helping them to start to tell their stories and to feel less embarrassed about putting themselves at the centre of their stories, different cultures have different reactions to doing that, and different people will react differently to being asked to talk about themselves. So question 1, the starting point story, is a way of warming up. Then we go on to the main storytelling questions, and these are based on the affirmative topics. These are the really important parts of the protocol, because we hope through these stories to yield really important information about what it is that makes it possible for us to grow these things in the organisation. So you should learn a lot from these stories. And finally, we finish the interview with a what we call a miracle or dream question. And this is about imagination, about the future, but it's always described in the present tense as if it was real. But you'll see a bit more of that in a moment. So let's start at the beginning and have a look at how we might do an introduction. As I said, what you're about to see isn't related to your organisation specifically, although you might find that the topics or the introduction has some connection to what you might be working on, but it's not specifically designed for your organisation. So this is all about showing you how to relax and find some ways of speaking about both appreciative inquiry, the work ahead, and the strategy that you're working on in some meaningful way.
So, thanks ever so much for giving me an hour of your time. Really appreciate it. I know it's really, hard to carve out a full hour. So, you might not know a lot about this, so forgive me. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the project, and then you can ask any questions. So, what this is about is we have a big summit coming up, as you know, and you've been invited to come along to it. And part of the job to prepare for the summit is to go out and do some interviews. And these are very special kind of interviews. They're based on a methodology called appreciative inquiry. And in short, what that means is we're looking for examples of real life experiences and stories of times when you have experienced something close to what we want to try to develop in our culture and our way of working over the years ahead. And this is all tied into our strategy to become more agile, resilient, more capable of moving at pace and changing with the times. And to do that, we know we've got to develop two key things. The first thing is the orientation towards learning, and the second is the way that we integrate and really value and develop diversity and difference in the organisation, because we know that when we do have much more difference and contention, actually that helps people to learn and develop and change faster. So that's the sort of thing we're working on, and you'll get to know a lot more about that when we're at the summit. But for the moment, what I want to do is to ask you some questions which are going to ask you to think about some experiences that you've had in your past. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So the trick here is to try to establish some rapport early on and to frame things in the positive, to talk about what you want more of rather than talking about the problems you might want to be solving. And as you start to work towards asking your first questions, really work with yourself to try to listen well, make good eye contact, and set aside any judgment that you may yourself have. Remember that your respondent might feel vulnerable about sharing their ideas, and they may still at this stage feel confused about what the work is and why you're talking to them. So just keep very connected with them, keep very close to their experience, and make sure you're understanding what's going on for them at that moment. So let's move on. We're going to start the actual inquiry itself by going to question 1, the personal starting point story, which has multiple parts, but this part is about really getting them used to talking about themselves, used to thinking of themselves in a positive way, and dealing with any little early challenges to them getting into the process with you. Let's see what happens.
First thing I want to start with is to just to get to know you a little bit, because we don't really know each other too well. So I want you to think back to when you really first started in this organisation, the very sort of first moments when you turned up in the organisation and started working here. Can you tell me a little bit about what that was like and what you learned about yourself in those really early days?
Okay, it was a little bit disconcerting. So I arrived, and my first day, I arrived, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know anybody except the persons who had interviewed me. So the first day was a little bit disconcerting, and it was a mixture of excitement and anxiety. And so it made me realize that I prefer to prepare myself a little bit for situations beforehand, and it would have helped me to have a little bit more information, some practical things about the organizations.
What was it about the organisation that really attracted you, though? What was there something particular that you wanted and that you discovered about yourself in terms of your fit for the organisation, say, when you first joined?
Yeah.
So notice here there was a very gentle redirect. So you may not have noticed, you might want to listen to it again, but the respondent in the interview had drifted away from the question that was asked. So as an interviewer, we asked about what excited and what brought them into the organisation at the beginning and what they discovered about themselves. But actually the respondent drifted into talking a little bit about what didn't happen for him, what he would have liked. So there was some woulds there. I would have liked to have this. Now this information is really interesting and important, but it isn't really serving what this question is all about. So remember, what we're trying to do is to get them used to talking about themselves in the affirmative, and to try to help them to get used to talking about what really happened rather than what they would have liked to have happened, or what in an ideal world should have happened, or some theory about what the right way to do something is. So we're trying to nudge this person back into being in the positive, being in the moment, and talking about what really happened, without actually making them feel wrong about the question, the answer that they started to give us.
The organizations.
What was it about the organisation that really attracted you, though? What was there something particular that you wanted and that you discovered about yourself in terms of your fit for the organisation, say, when you first joined?
Yes, it was really the sort of the innovativeness of that organization, and the fact that they were growing very fast, and they were sort of young, agile, and really experimenting and with speed. So that's I guess what attracted me.
Great, fabulous, thank you. You might be noticing that I'm making a few notes. I want to just explain a little bit about what the notes are for. The notes are for me to take into the summit. They won't identify you particularly in any way. For my benefit, I'll remember who you are and where I get the different information from, but I'll check in with you at the end about that as well, just to make sure that you're happy with the notes I'm taking. So tell me a little bit about what makes you most proud about your work right
now. I guess the quality of my work. I don't like to do things in halves. I really like to do things well and to almost to perfection. So I tend to have very high standards, and I like to network with a lot of people. So I like to connect with people and to build relationships in my work. That's very important to me.
Lovely, thank you.
So you'll be starting to notice that there's quite a lot of body language, a lot of really close active listening, asking questions which help the person to keep talking, And in particular, at this point, I'm listening for not just the facts, but also trying to tune into feelings and images and any moments that really seem to sing out for the individual that I'm interviewing. I might ask other questions that help them to expand their story or to seek clarity. And remember to leave time and silence for thinking, because that's okay. You don't have to fill every moment. Give people time to think. And I mentioned to my respondent about note taking. Some people might be nervous about the notes that you're taking, and they'll be wondering what's going to happen to them, especially if your summit is in an open environment. So you need to be thinking about how you're going to take those notes and make sure those notes are able to be taken with you to whatever venues you might be visiting over the time. You don't need to capture everything. The most important thing is that you stay really well connected with your respondent, and writing copious notes can break that connection. So just write enough for yourself to remember what it is that they've been talking about.
The last question in this little section, if I was to ask the people around you who work with you every day what they would say your top 3 qualities are, the things that make you an invaluable person in the team, what do you think they would tell me about you?
Wow.
It's a tricky question.
I guess they would probably say that I'm reliable. I can be really relied on. I'm a good listener. And I'm a good team player.
Well, we all get caught out sometimes. That is a really rookie error, leaving a phone on. Immediately it breaks into the space and drags energy away from the growing trust in the room. And if you answer it, you are saying to your respondent something or someone else is more important to you, and that breaks the trust. And if you don't answer it, why did you leave it on? So really, turn the phone off, eh? So we've started our interview. We've looked at question 1 and the different parts of it, and we've started to explore how to make some connections. Now we're going to get to the main topic questions and explore how to get those answered and worked through. You may, like many companies or organisations, have multiple topics that you're going to be working with. These are from another organisation that I've been working with, and they actually had 6 topics over a major process that lasted a couple of years. But you may just have 2 or 3 topics to work with. And the way to use these is to have them printed on cards, and then people can pick a card that's calling them, and you'll see a little bit about how I do that with our respondent in a moment. But we're not trying to make sure that every topic is always covered. In fact, it's actually of interest to us to find out which topics are picked most and which topics are picked least, because it tells us what we might have to work hardest at in the organisation. So you don't need to force or manipulate it in any way. Just go with the energy of your respondent. When you're in the topic section, you really are helping the person to tell stories. Now, when we tell stories, we're in a kind of gossip mode. If you think about when you're down the bar or out in a club with somebody, or you're with your family, and somebody starts to tell you about their day or something extraordinary that's happened to them, we immediately know how to go into gossip mode. We ask them questions like, so how did that start? And what happened next? And what did you do? What did they say next? How did that happen? What did that feel like? So we know instinctively when we're interested in a story how to keep people in the story. But at work, we often get trained to ask analytical questions. So we jump out of the story into conceptual world of asking things like, why did that happen? Or what should have happened? Or what theory do you have of that? What do you think about this? All these questions can be very useful in some settings, but they're not appreciative inquiry questions, and they don't keep people in the learning from the stories. And hopefully, if you've watched the introduction to AI, you'll already know why that's so important. So try to keep to questions that are on the left-hand side here.
So what I want to do now is I'm going to show you some three sort of topics, we call them, and they're the things that we're particularly wanting to enhance and grow in the organisation right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread them out on this table here and have a look at them, and just let your eyes wander over them, and you can take your time to take a look at them, read the text, look at the pictures, and see if one starts to call out to you because you can remember a story, you can remember an experience that is triggered by the text or the idea that's on that particular sheet. Tell me when you think you have one.
I think this one,
Yeah?
we're all active learners, tends
Okay.
to catch my eye.
So what I'd like you to do is just to take a moment to sink back into that moment that came to mind. So an experience, it could be something that was really big, or it might be something that was just a moment in time. It doesn't matter at all. But try to just gather your thoughts around it and sort of almost like rewinding a videotape, go right back to the beginning of the story. And what I'd really like you to do is to tell me that story of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start at the beginning, tell me what was going on.
Okay, this is when I took on the role of leading one function in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the manager was a very very charismatic leader, and yet he was a very humble leader. So he was very low key. And one of the reasons why I chose this topic caught my attention is that it reminded me of several occasions in which he was making himself open and vulnerable to the team by saying things like, look guys, I don't know the answer. I need us to think about this really carefully because I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so for me, this exemplified really learning as a quality, or as accepting to learn and to not know the answer, accepting to say I don't know.
So what you might already start to notice is, even though we're starting to get some information here, the respondent is staying at a level of a bit of generalization. So he's saying this is something that happened a lot. It reminded him of this person. It often happened. And when you start hearing offens and lots and generalizations like that, by all means let it run, because it's important to see if it's going to land on a specific. But you'll always get a better quality story if you can try to get the person to focus on a specific incident, because there'll be lots of things that surround it that the person will only be partially aware of. And if they stay at the level of the general, they won't access it. But if you can get them to name a specific moment, they'll be much more explicit. Their memories will be much more crisp, and they'll be able to notice things that help you with some of the support questions about what else was going on, what's made that possible for that person, and get at the much richer information.
Yeah, it'd be really great if you could take me to a really specific occasion and tell me it like a story.
Where we had a big meeting, and that was coming up, and there was a few glitches, and some preparation had not been done, and etc. And of course he was responsible, and he sort of took on the mistake. So one of the team members had made a mistake or several mistakes, and he took this on without saying who it was or without blaming anybody. He stood up and he said, "Look, guys, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and I will clear it up." And this was very, very powerful. It had a really powerful effect on the whole team.
And was there anything, do you think, surrounding that person that made that possible? What were the conditions that made that possible for him?
Well, the culture of that organization was really an open culture and a very collaborative culture, encouraging initiative, not punishing mistakes. Mistakes were allowed. So I think the culture of the context was very, very important.
So I'm going to give you the topics again, and you've already done that one now. So we've got a little bit of time. So I'm wondering if you could have another look at the two that are remaining. Is there another one that catches your eye that seems to speak to an experience that you've had?
So remember that silence is really important. Don't fill it, let them think. People are not always going to be able to come immediately up with a story. They may not pick a topic straight away. They may need a little time to work their way through it. And just sit quietly and let them do that. And there's no reason to hurry them at all. Now, for the sake of this video, we've really cut short all of these answers, and normally we would use the support questions and we'd really help somebody to try to dig behind their story and find out as many things as possible about what made it possible. It could be personal qualities, qualities in other people, situational factors, process, procedure and business enablers, relationships, anything at all, right down to the way the office is laid out, anything and everything that really enabled that experience of what you're really wanting to develop to be present is really important, because what we're trying to do is find out the root causes and support structures that make it possible to be even more like the things that we're inquiring into. So let's move on to the final stage in the AI interview. And this is the miracle or dream question. And this is where we take everything the person has told us and we're trying to help them to project it out into the future and really think about how it would feel and look and be if the things that they've been talking about were even more present. Let's have a look.
I want you to now think about, we're going to sort of ask about projecting into the future, thinking about the future a bit. I want you to imagine that it's now 2 years out. It's the summer of 2020. So I want you to imagine as if you've kind of, I don't know, fallen asleep for 2 years and woken up. And as you wake up, you notice that suddenly all around you, the organisation is much more adaptive and resilient, and really that sort of sense of a real vibrant learning organisation is really alive in the organisation. So it's as if you've suddenly become awake to this new place and you're exploring it as if for the first time. And as you kind of walk through this environment, I'd like you to describe to me what you see, and to describe it in the present tense as if you were really there and you were almost narrating your experience of being in this new place to me. What do you see around you in this organisation that's super adaptive and super resilient?
Things like, first of all, it's an open environment physically. I mean, the environment is wide open. There are no closed doors. It's kind of all the desks are sort of together. There are small groups of people having passionate conversations, standing up around coffee tables or around desks. People are smiling a lot. People are very high energy and focused at the same time. There is a sense of play around. People are sort of laughing and they're very alive. So it's a very, very lively place.
Is there anything that you're noticing has stopped happening that used to be normal? Something I'm trying to ask you to sort of notice an absence almost, which I know is difficult, but something that was normal before that's no longer seems to be going on.
You don't see people isolated, so you don't see very seldom, if ever, do you see somebody on their own, sort of doing nothing but on their own, not speaking to anybody else. So people are interacting a lot, and they seem to be connected a lot.
Lovely. And is there something that started that you never saw before in the old days?
So remember, the answers that my respondent was giving are not important. It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with what he was saying, because this is just an example. But you'll have noticed that we were asking all sorts of questions. I was asking questions to try to help that person to explore the differences as well as the similarities, and what this new organisation would look like. Overall, we need to remember that when we carry out a discovery interview with somebody, it needs to be really felt to be a gift of time and attention. This is a moment where you can really connect, because a lot of the change that appreciative inquiry generates is generated through the experience of the interview itself. So it makes people think. These stories act on us in very interesting ways, even though we may not be conscious of it. And it helps us to start to almost reprogram our minds a little in the direction of these things that we find most helpful. So you'll notice, as hopefully, that it's pretty informal and easygoing. It's gossipy. We try to make it pleasant. It's nice to be in a nice environment, and to try to put somebody at ease about what they're telling you. So what's expected of you now? If you are one of the very first interviewers in your organisation doing this work, you may well be now required to try to recruit this person that you've just interviewed to become an interviewer themselves. And if that's the case, then take a look at some of the handbooks that you might have been given, which will give you some details about how to recruit them and what you might want to direct them towards. If you are a participant coming up at a summit and you're not required to recruit anybody else to come to the summit, but you're just gathering stories that you yourself will take into the summit, then all you need to do is to make sure that you keep hold of your notes, that you do all your interviews with your colleagues. And then right before attending the summit, it's useful to spend a bit of time looking back over your stories and re-immersing yourself in them to really feel ready to bring them in the room. And when you come to the event itself, you will be carrying out another conversation, and then we'll be working through the rest of the appreciative inquiry process to use all of the rich data and stories that you have available to take this forward into designs for the future. But most of all, just to be the change. That's all we really require of anybody, is to think about what you've heard, think about how those stories might influence you and how you might adapt and move your own practice just a little to develop more of what you want in the organisation. So, as I said, at the event itself, you will be starting with discovery, where you've been working right now, doing an interview and building on that data. We'll be stretching that forward into real strong and positive anticipations of what you might actually create in the future, and starting the process of designing specific prototypes that might help to make the change possible for you. After that, it'll be about improvising, empowering, and adjusting to really make it work. So, my name's Karen, and if you have a summit coming up and if you're going to be joining it, then you'll see me there. And I hope to work with you over the months ahead to really bring this work alive for you. Please reach out if you need any help. That's it from me. Have a great time doing your interviews, and I really hope to hear all about it really soon. Bye for now.